Time is 7:02 and I'll call to order 7:03. The city council meeting for November 23rd, 2015. I apologize for being a few minutes late. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. DeGenova?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. And item 2 is the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's invocation will be given by Councilman. Please stand.
Will you pray with me? Bow your heads. In praise and thanksgiving we stand before thee, O Lord. You have given us a harvest of plenty, a bounty of blessings no other nation can claim. Now teach us to share our overflowing quantity of good with others. Lord, teach us how to give our harvest and share the fruits of our fields so that the entire world can benefit from the wonderful riches we so proudly cultivate. Make us the garnishers of the world, tending to the needs of those who have so much less. Let us spread the seeds of love and caring and goodwill to all of our four corners of the world, and nurturing the growth of others so that the life itself will bloom forth where there was only barren soil. I ask this, Lord, in your name, and I ask that you pray for those in France who are going through this hardship. And I ask that you take care of our servicemen and women and our service units here in the city of Delaware, our police and fire. We ask these things in your name, Lord. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joe. Item 4 is the approval of motion summary of the special meeting of council held November 2nd, 2015, as recorded and transcribed, as well as the meeting held November 9th, 2015, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. DeGenova?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read that in to the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Parking and Safety Committee meeting held August 17th, 2015. Item B, acceptance of the motion summaries of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meetings held August 18th, September 15th, and October 20th, 2015. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary of the Shade Tree Commission meeting held August 25th, 2015. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting held October 28th, 2015.
Thank you.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mrs. Keller to accept the consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. DeGenova?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments, anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close item 6 and move on to item 7, which is committee reports. And we'll start with Mr. Jones.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Mrs. Keller.
I have nothing.
Mr. DeGenova.
I have the Shade Tree Committee tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, and that'll be the last meeting. We are not having one in December
Okay.
due to the holiday.
I bet you don't have one yet, do you, Mr. Rohr? Don't worry, you will. Mr. Hellinger? Mr. Hellinger?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Schaefer? Okay. Move on down to item 8, with the consideration of a liquor permit transfer. Please read this on the record.
Item A, from Bellasinos of Columbus, Inc., doing business as Shorty's, 554 West Central Avenue, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, to IC of Ohio, LLC, doing business as Shorty's, 554 West Central Avenue, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit classes D1 and D2.
Thank you. Chief Pijanowski, good evening. I like
Good evening.
this. It's coming in nice.
It's not much longer for this world. Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a transfer of a liquor permit. This is at Shorty's on West Central. This is just a transfer to new ownership, Tom Ibbenson. He is essentially planning on running the business the same way, no major changes. They will be pursuing a D6 permit for Sunday sales. That's not part of this consideration, but there no reason to object to this permit nor any future permit for Sunday sales.
Does the Sunday sale have to go to the voters?
I don't think so. I think they've applied for the permit.
Okay.
I'm not sure where they're at with that yet. We just kind of found out during the course of this investigation that's their intention, but that's another process.
Okay, just curious. And what is the wish of council on this?
Move that we approve without objection.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. DeGenova?
Yes.
Mr. Worrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Congratulations. They're really nice people. I met them the other day. Item 9 is consideration of resolution 15-54. The clerk will please read this into the record.
Resolution number 15-54, a resolution accepting, rejecting the recommendations of unresolved issues pertaining to the modification of the collective bargaining agreement between the IAFF and the City of Delaware.
Mr. Shulman.
Madam Mayor, members of council, first I'd like to go over some procedural things. This is the first time I'm putting on the agenda this way. In the past, you may recall, if you've been here for a few years, we've had 2 different agenda items, and one was accepting and one was rejecting, and it always confused everybody because no one knew what that meant. So with this one, it's one resolution, and I made it clear that if you vote aye, that's to accept, and if you vote nay, that's rejecting it. So that's sort of what you're talking about when you're voting. Procedure-wise, if council does determine to accept the report, then we're done. If council decides to reject the report, what happens is we notify the state. They assign a conciliator, a binding arbitrator, and we schedule that and we go forward. If council does ultimately decide to reject the recommendations at this time, my first step will be, well, I was going to say my first step will be to call the IAFF, but I'll just go talk to them after the meeting because I would really like if you do go that way, I would really like an opportunity to meet with them and see if we can negotiate and reach a resolution prior to having that arbitration hearing. My opinion matters very little on these things. It's you're the vote, but I think we're close on a lot of issues, and the report could provide a basis for us to reach an agreement if you're not inclined to accept it as is. So that will be my first step, and with the hope that we won't have to actually go to arbitration because fact finding was 2 days, and I'd rather not get a deal that we can live with. And I think both sides would probably agree that a deal we can agree on is better than one that we don't have a choice on that's foisted upon us by a third party. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's procedurally what would happen and what my next step would be depending on which way you ultimately decide to vote. The simple thing is if you vote aye, you're accepting the fact finder's decision and we'll incorporate that in the contract. Nay is rejecting the fact finder's decision and we would move to conciliation with the hopes that we can negotiate in the meantime. And I really don't believe, just based on the way it works with the appointment and the holidays coming up, we probably wouldn't have that conciliation hearing till January at the earliest, so that would give us time to meet a few times. So
Procedurally, what's the motion then?
Let's do a roll call.
you're just gonna do roll call vote, and we'll write the number of ayes and nays, and that'll be the way it works. I would just say, yeah, let's make a motion to approve. That's fine, and then you vote nay. That means reject, and we'll circle that on the thing. So.
I need you to explain this again.
Let's just
Okay.
do a roll call and not make a motion.
Let's just make, yeah, how about a motion to vote on it without approve, and then we'll move to vote, and then an aye is I like the report, a nay is I do not like the report, or reject the report. Is everyone clear?
I move that we vote on resolution 15-54.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Keller?
Nay.
Mr. DeGenova?
Nay.
Mr. Rohr?
Nay.
Mr. Hellinger?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Nay.
Mayor Riggle?
Nay.
Okay, so
5-2.
fellas, if you're going to be around afterwards, I wouldn't mind talking to you real quick. I'll call Kevin as well, but we'll debrief.
Cool.
Thank you. Well, we can't do item 10 or 11 because it's not late enough yet. So let's go on to city manager's report.
Don't have a lot, except there's.
Drag it out, would you? 15 minutes.
All right, I'll read my budget message verbatim. So there's I know some of you have signed up for the Economic Development 411, and the county has made that available to county and city and township officials, so that
How many are going then? Just,
I believe Kent is going to be able to go.
I don't think I can.
It's the
I think I
next,
may
it's
have
a
just had a couple, it's the 4th of December.
it's a week
Yeah.
from Friday, I think.
Shoot.
It's a week from Friday, so.
December 4th.
guess none of us are going.
Okay.
I will change that meeting.
December the 4th.
I can change it.
Yeah, it's worth, if you can.
Yeah, I've gone every year, I'd like to go, I'll call. see if I can-
And they've changed it this year so that there's actually some very good speakers. So I think it's really going to be.
like a TED.
Yeah. And I think you saw earlier, we submitted the request through Columbus 2020 and the partnership for funding for the business center, and we should be hearing back in the next few weeks about that. So that's moving in the right direction. And just as a follow-up from the EV charging station discussion that council had a couple of months ago, Steve and Carrie Overfield last week and talked to them about kind of a memorandum of understanding between the city and their company, Renergy, with respect to how this would work. And I'll be following up with some comments that Bill had, then talking to Darren. But they're anxious, obviously, to move ahead. What we wanted to nail down from our end is it is a transaction between us and between them. We want to make sure that we've covered all the bases. So I'll be following up with Darren and getting them a kind of a draft agreement that they'll review and then get back to us. So they're excited that we're still very interested, and I think it makes sense. There was a question about making they proposed two electric vehicle charging spaces, and Carrie had suggested that one of those be for hybrid vehicles, which would include EV. That might get more utilization than just two EV spaces. So I thought it made sense. So if you're driving a Prius, it's not an electric, it's a hybrid. So that would make that type of a car, you could park it there in that space. So if you haven't had a chance, I'm sure you have, the signs are up, and we're getting a lot of very positive feedback about the downtown. They really look nice, and credit to Dave and his staff and all of the time that it's spent in public works. That's just phase one. Phase two will be the perimeter signs as you're coming into the city, the major gateways. So I think that's going to it's going to look really sharp. I forwarded you an email that we got over the weekend from a gentleman who is always quick to compliment, and he points out things when we've got some issues, and you saw the email, he was very pleased with that. So I hope you agree those things, the signs look good. So I can't really
A
make.
little confusing.
Yeah,
The one on Henry, some are a little confusing. The one on Henry and Winter, it points up to shops, and that's the.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Someone told me about that.
okay, well then Dave will have to handle that one. I've not seen that one.
No, we did that on purpose just to see if everyone was watching the signs.
Good job.
Apparently they are, because we've heard about that one quite a lot, especially from the police department. Just an excellent team of detectives over there. Yeah, the sign company's fixing it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that one, I hadn't seen that one. There was some discussion about the signs The Parking and Safety had a committee meeting last week about working with the county with respect to the parking spaces, and I've talked to Kent Schaefer about that. That parking, there will be a special Parking and Safety Committee meeting held in early January to get the report back from the county so that we can satisfy one of the conditions of the courthouse project, which was concurrence by the Parking and Safety Committee meeting that this parking issue had been addressed.
Scheduled?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No, hasn't been scheduled yet. And speaking of courthouse, I don't know how many of you saw the Elks
Went down to
building
watch
was coming down today.
Watch
But
it go
it's,
down.
Did you see how fast it came down?
Yeah,
I know.
One little bump and it.
Well, it's a couple big
Yeah.
bumps, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Cigar building.
and I'll be out of the office tomorrow afternoon through the week for a Thanksgiving holiday. That's what I got. For the budget, yes. Well, that's one of the things we wanted to talk about, getting these meetings set for the budget, but I was thinking we'd do that
fine.
under item one. Yeah.
So let's do council comments, and we still have 10 minutes. Mr. Jones, do you have anything?
Two, first, it was a great parade yesterday, if you had a chance to go. A lot of people on the chilly side, but in hindsight, I guess 35 isn't that chilly compared to a month now. We had talked a couple months ago or meetings ago about taking a trip up to Lima, Ohio for Main Street. I don't know whether that happened to that or.
There was a trip that was planned to Worcester with respect to Main Street. Then we talked to you about Lima with respect to their Entrepreneur Center. And
Yeah.
Sean's had some follow-up discussion about that. And I don't know if you want to speak to that.
For 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can talk for slowly. You can ask Bill. I'm pretty good at that. Thanks for the question, Chris. I did speak with the folks up at the Lima Entrepreneur Center, and they had a little hiccup recently where the nonprofit that actually was running the portion with the business counseling and whatnot, they were not well funded, and they are gone. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with that space in the building. The chamber and the economic development department still exist in the building, but the entity, there was a nonprofit that was running that portion. It has exited the building, and they're working on that. If you still would like to do a tour of that type of facility, I can certainly find, there's a bunch of co-work, actually, and that might actually be better for us is to actually look at a co-working space, because I do believe at least the space portion will be more patterned off of a co-working office than a straight up incubator. So if you do desire to do that, I can find a good co-working space in Central Ohio even that we can look at.
That's all I had there.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank you.
Booster, I think, was for Main Street. We had suggested
Right.
Main Street, go to Booster and check it out. And
Right.
she didn't want to go unless Tom went with her. That wasn't the whole idea. We wanted her to go check it out.
Okay.
Mrs. Keller?
I received another complaint today from the owner of OPA about the trash in front of his restaurant. He sent me a picture. I have it on my phone if anyone wants to look at it.
I saw it yesterday.
Well, I noticed when we went to the parade, there were some white trash bags out there. And the picture that he sent me today are 3 black trash bags. So it's different trash. But it looked bad for the parade, again, to have trash out on the sidewalk.
I've got to follow up. I know we talked with Terry Davenport about this last week, and there was supposed to be a follow-up meeting with the owner of the building to change the way the tenants are disposing of their trash, either through the back in a dumpster. And I'm looking to Bill right now. I don't know if there's been any follow-up discussion on this, but I know it is a.
Can we put a little sign in those planters where they're putting the thing that says, don't dump your trash on the sidewalk, it's littering?
Well, they're putting it out front, 'cause that's where the trash is picked up out front, for the residential there. As Tom alluded to, trying to get an understanding with the owners or the property owners there is difficult, especially when the tenants change over so much. The trash is picked up on Monday and Wednesday and Friday in downtown areas. People do put their trash out on the front sidewalk and we collect it. Trying to get all trash to the back is where the problem is. It's a reoccurring problem that's been here probably as long as I've been here in the city, and I know staff, even before I was down at Public Works, has worked numerous times with the building owners trying to find a way to get tenants to take the trash to the back. The difficulties are not all places have access to dumpsters in back either, because not all property owners will work mutually together to participate in the location or the cost of a dumpster. So the tenants in a sense are in a difficult position because they are tenants. They do generate trash, but I feel they probably don't know where to put the trash, or they're put in a situation, for example, on South Sandusky, that have to walk out downstairs all the way north to William Street, then around William Street to the alley and back to find a place to put it. And they probably just don't want to do that. So it's a difficult situation. I don't want to justify or minimize the issue, as it really is somewhat unsightly. It's not the only location downtown where trash appears out front when we pick it up, but it's the one that seems to be very, very routine. And it seems to always be on weekends it shows up.
Well, it's in front of a restaurant.
Yeah, and knowing that we won't be able to pick it up till Monday, if they would just hold it till Monday morning would be helpful. But again, the tenants, then you're asking them to hold 3 or 4 bags of trash in their apartment because they have no other place to put it. So Tom said we're trying to work with the property owners, but it's a difficult situation. But we're going to continue to look for more angles. It's not that there's not trash collection or enough trash collection. It's that these folks don't have a convenient way to get rid of their trash.
But isn't that, to me, it would be up to the property owner to figure that out, not us. So say you have until this date to figure it out, or we'll issue littering citations, or.
That's somewhat the nature of the internal discussion we had, is would have to probably change some policy that gives us a little more teeth with the owner of the building, as opposed to worrying about who's generating the trash or the tenant, to say it's the responsibility of the building owner to make sure the trash is managed appropriately with their tenants. And it gives us the ability to go back on the owner. I think that's the only way to get the owner involved, because they're not on site all the time. They tend to say, well, I can't control my tenants, but if we have some policy in place or even some code that says the owner of that facility is responsible for, here's 10 different points of trash collection, including don't put it out front, we can go back on them. I think that's the direction we may have to go, because of all the attempts in the past at dealing with tenants going through trash, trying to find out whose trash it is. It's just very, very difficult. So that's where we are with it, and we are moving forward with that.
So does this apartment not have a door that goes out back?
No,
Period?
they're only out front.
Well, what about fire? I mean, how is that safe?
I don't know if the fire chief could probably address that. We want to kill a little bit more time. But, I think a lot of that is just kind of grandfathered. The buildings are old, and we are trying to get second floor, third floor occupancy. So there are some exceptions. I don't know if there's fire escapes out back or not, but
How
we
many
don't want.
units are in there?
Like 5 or 6, I think.
I've only been in there a couple of times. So.
But Bill mentions the legislation. It might just be that we have to take a look at strengthening our enforcement powers to require them, as you say, to find a solution. And if that solution is it's the stipulation in the lease, tenants have to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
With respect to walking back to take their trash, that's what they have to do.
I mean, how
That's
hard
right.
would it be to put a trash chute off the back?
I don't know. I can say Public Works, code enforcement and planning, PD's all been involved in this issue in the past. So if we're looking at something fundamentally a different way to collect the trash, whether it's smaller cans or.
We're going to
toters.
face this more and more because there's more activity on the second, third floor of the buildings downtown for apartments. And so it's, we got to figure it out.
It's not one that we're turning our back on by any means. We spend a lot of time, inordinate amount of time, trying to deal with downtown refuse, because it's not everyone has access to a dumpster or even frontage, or only limited to frontage and no rear access. So it's a difficult situation. The benefit of us being involved in the collection is we can go back down on Tuesday and pick up a mess, and Wednesday pick up a mess, versus private haulers, they're going to come by once a week and that's it. So we're able to have a lot more hands-on in terms of this.
Can they walk it across the street and put it in our dumpster?
Well, that's happened.
Oh.
We don't want to encourage that, but large objects have appeared there too. So it's not just the small bags. We end up with furniture out back, mattresses out back,
And again, because we're a public entity, we can go and clean those up on the spot and not be charged a significant fee from a private hauler to do so.
What about those trash? Have one somewhere, it wouldn't be big enough for a whole bag.
And they're
No,
putting out their
yeah,
multiple bags. I don't know how many were out there on
There were
Sunday.
2 white bags, and then the picture I have is 3 black ones.
right. I mean, we need to talk with them as a starting point. We need to review, perhaps with Darren, what our legislation allows us to do and see how we bring back something to see if we want to strengthen that. And if council is willing to strengthen it, to the point where we can impose some form of penalty on a property owner. We want to continue to encourage these owners to keep these places rented. And we can research the thing like the chutes. I'm not sure it's a real practical solution. What's the community center down there that Delaware Hotel was? Yeah, Delaware Place built chutes, and they're having a lot of trouble with the chutes because bags break open in them, and then they start to smell and collect insects. So it may not be the best answer, but it requires a lot of continued conversation as tenants change and owners change to try to find something a little bit better. And that's one of the things I've tried to encourage our staff is just because we haven't been successful doesn't mean there's still not a solution that we can try to find. And if it requires some legislative change, I think our council is probably willing to listen to that if it means we can guarantee a little less.
Can you send me those pictures, Lisa? Can you send me those pictures?
Sure.
when you get a chance?
So,
I think maybe by the next meeting, the next city council meeting, I'll have Darren take a look at what might have to do legislatively and bring some options back to you in that regard, because I think that's the way it's going to be
The issue
more of a
right now is
regulatory solution as opposed to a voluntary compliance, change your habit solution.
Our customers are independent tenants or property owners, or we're all customers to our own refuse service. So that who owns the building isn't really drawn into that arrangement or agreement on how we're set up now. Modify that in some way and look specifically at treat downtown as its own district and how we take care of refuse in the downtown area, because it is kind of a custom district, and maybe come back with some suggestions and then be able to reach out to the building owners also and say, this is where we're at. This issue is important, and we want to be able to make some changes and get some feedback from them as well.
because what if everyone who owned a business just stuck their trash out front? Why would anyone pay for a dumpster if you can just stick bags of trash on the sidewalk?
Drive past Solar Saloon on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
it
won't
shouldn't,
believe what's out there.
it shouldn't be
It's all
allowed there
nice and neat,
either.
but
I've seen it, the
He's got-
boxes
and
and,
bottles and.
Yeah, they're a situation where they have no other rear area to put anything, so they're stuck with the front of the property regardless of,
Well,
When
both
it's
of his
picked up.
entrances, one's on Sandusky and one's on William,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
But he puts his out early, like
Yeah.
2:00. And picks up on Monday.
Well, that might get back to the changing
Right.
the rules.
Right.
yeah.
You know?
I'm definitely willing to look at it. I just don't think we should have a city where business owners are trying to operate restaurants where there's bags of trash out
Well,
front.
Right.
Okay, thank you very
Okay,
much.
sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
And thanks for getting us to 7:30.
Right.
Okay, item 10 is the 7:30 public hearing. 15-112. If the clerk will please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 15-112, an ordinance adding a new chapter 192 to the codified ordinances of the City of Delaware regarding municipal income tax and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to comply with the State of Ohio imposed deadline for the effective date of these required changes, and as such will be in full force and effect January 1st, 2016.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'll jump in. I'll introduce John Henner. Many of you may know him, hopefully in a good way, not because you had tax issues with the city, but John's our tax administrator and has been since 1991. So quite a bit of experience in municipal income tax. I want to make a couple comments, and I'll let John explain a little bit about what we've done with the changes to mandated changes to our income tax code. First of all, Darren, I believe, did make a couple of the changes that came up at the first reading at the last council meeting. we added an emergency clause. That way we're okay. Depending on when we had a third reading, we can adopt it and have it effective by January 1st. In addition, he put a sunset clause, would at a point in time, January 1st, 2024, the existing Chapter 199 will sunset and it'll go away. So I think that came up at the last council meeting. I sent out a couple documents to City Council. We really kind of struggled how to present these changes to council because they're just quite involved.
A glass of wine and I got through it, let me tell you.
You did, well, that's great. The bigger picture issue, they're not going to fundamentally change, I don't believe, our revenue stream. It's just how we go about enforcing our income tax that's going to change a bit. And the problem we had was we were trying to look at if it was possible to show the changes, i.e. show our existing tax ordinance, which is what we do with many changes to some of our legislation. And here's the new language, but it just became too complicated to try to cut and paste all that. So ultimately what we did was we presented the ordinance at the last council meeting that in essence takes a new boilerplate type of tax ordinance that we'll talk a little bit about. And we amended that or changed that to the specific municipal tax issues that are somewhat unique to Delaware. There weren't a lot of them. It was just a lot easier just to present it that way as opposed to go back and trying to amend the prescribed format. It just got to be too involved. Process-wise, again, we'll go to a third reading and hopefully adopt this. So it's because one way or another, it needs to be enforced the first of the year. But another thing I think we came across as we were going through this, probably not just us, but probably some other cities, is we're going to need to get this tax ordinance in place and give it some time. There's probably still going to be some challenges, perhaps in courts and otherwise. But I can see a point maybe mid-year or sometime in 2016 where we come back and once we've had it in place, go through and make some other subtle changes, perhaps not so much to the actual ordinance, but the rules and regulations that are behind the income tax ordinance, because it's kind of wordy and it's kind of hard to understand. Ultimately, we've got to take that language and get people to understand what it is that they need to do. And traditionally, historically, we've had, even with our previous tax ordinance, there was a set of rules and regulations that further explained how different sections were applied. And we got to figure out what legal status that may or may not take. If that's something in the past, which I don't think it was council approved, we may have that, because with everything else that's changing, but that only time will tell. And then we'll work our way through that in 2016. Plus, there may be some other slight tweaks that we thought about making at this time, but really didn't want to overly complicate the issue. And we really tried to focus in on these are just changes that were mandated by the state legislation. We have to make them. And so that's the approach we took. I'll turn it over to John, and I'm just going to have him kind of walk through. I don't know if all of you or if any of you got a chance to kind of take a look at the documents. The Ohio Municipal League kind of took the lead, so to speak, rather than having every city hire an attorney and try to come up with their own legislation. And what they ultimately did is they kind of put together a new version of what we had back in 1977 was the model municipal income tax, which pretty much covers most of the things that would apply to Delaware, but there were changes that we made to that. And I'll let John talk a little bit about them. And again, if you have questions, if you want to ask tonight or even something that you'd like to get some follow-up, just let us know. John?
Yeah, this is a little dry, so I brought the water.
Are you done?
Madam Mayor and members of council, Ohio House Bill 5 passed about a year ago at this time, the municipal tax uniformity bill. It's been in the works for years with the Ohio Society of CPAs pushing for uniformity for all the cities, all 544 taxing municipalities. Once the bill was passed, the revised code, section 70, Ohio Revised Code, section 718, which dictates how municipal taxes to be collected, was rewritten to incorporate the changes mandated by the passage of this bill. The revision of the Ohio Revised Code forced all cities to comply with the changes and therefore rewrite their ordinances. The Ohio Municipal League, led by Attorney Gene Hollins, who's a municipal attorney here in Columbus area, worked with a committee of tax preparers and municipal tax administrators from around the state to come up with a model ordinance that complies with the changes made in House Bill 5. The model ordinance has provided us with guidelines as well as language to use in creating our new ordinance. There are areas where optional language was provided depending on how each city treats various tax issues. Also, we added language in areas not covered by the model ordinance and the Ohio Revised Code. This would include items unique to Delaware, such as our reduced credit formula for taxes paid to other cities and our landlord-tenant registration requirement. The new chapter 192 ordinance, the new income tax ordinance chapter 192 is made up mainly of the model ordinance combined with areas where the language from chapter 191, our current tax ordinance, is still relevant. We tried to keep the changes to a minimum while still complying with the law. Major changes start taking place in 2016, which they have to do with the tax return due dates, estimated tax thresholds, and withholding requirements for employers. Chapter 191, our current ordinance, will be in effect until the tax years it covers will be out of statute, which is about 6 or 7 years. Did anybody enjoy reading the tax ordinance?
Well,
I like that you brought a prop, though. I don't know that anyone's ever done that.
The subtlety with the changes is you can read the language and maybe you understand it, maybe you don't, but there's parts of it, even though it was intended to simplify and standardize from one city to the next. Like anything, you've heard the word tax simplification. It ultimately, going through all those different groups and everybody putting their 2 cents worth in, especially this casual entry in the past, that's the one thing that does have that potential. It makes it, whether it's going to impact us from a revenue standpoint or just make it even more difficult to try to administer this tax. Our overall goal is to try to make sure everybody pays their fair share. Well, it's an earnings tax, and unlike a sales tax where it's a point of sale, it's easy to enforce. We got to find out who should be filing. It's one thing our residents, if we can get them to file. It's another thing people working in the city. And in the past, they had a 10-day casual entry. Now they expanded that to 20. But the reality of that is it's very difficult to really question, even if we wanted to take all the time to go through somebody's books. As an example, there's a lot of discussion about the JED out there at the interstate. Well, all this construction period income tax from the contractors working there. Well, it's a challenge just finding out what contractors and subcontractors of subcontractors are even working there. And now you have no basis to say whether any number of their employees were there for 20 days in a row. Both John and I went to a couple training sessions and some meetings this year about this, and even the experts in the field were somewhat debating about what 20 days meant. Is that 20 days per calendar year? Is that 20 continuous days? And so ultimately, I think there's going to be a number of these things that hopefully over time, there'll be a kind of general consensus on how this is going to apply. And that's why I said it's something, we may be coming back next year, maybe even into 2017, and try to, our other intent is to make sure at least our ordinance, if somebody does take the time to read it, or they have to refer to it, that it's somewhat understandable. But so those are some of the challenges.
How much, Dean and John, is the difference on the apartment? We've had problems years ago about residents living in the apartments filed city income tax. Is there much change in that? Is it pretty the same?
Our compliance is a lot better now with the registration. We keep that really up to date.
So then the prosecutor can handle it when they...
Correct.
Yeah. That's the challenge it poses. We've gotten access to names sooner, and sometimes we wouldn't get them. But now, we're in the middle of the failure to file process, and we generate a listing of people that should have filed by April 15th that haven't. it's 5,000 people on this list, and it just becomes a challenge to go through and try to communicate to these people. But that's that's just part of the
Does it update the subcontractors and what is it, the 1990 or the form they're supposed to fill out as an independent contractor? Is there any change in that?
I think we do a pretty fair job, at least we used to, getting information from our building department about people. That's why
People taking permits out, then they'll.
right, but again, trying to then find out who's there. But again, if if you have a plumbing contractor and you're working on a big job, you might have several plumbers, but if they're only here for 2 weeks, they don't have to withhold.
20-day thing.
Right.
I did just want to tangentially mention, we have the new position. It's actually going to start on Wednesday, December 2nd. And Dean mentioned there's 5,000 folks who haven't filed, and that would be one of the target groups of people for the imposter. However, I want to temper expectations because, we're going to be very careful with who we charge for failure to file, and that we want to make sure that they're still here. Sometimes it might look like they failed to file, but they might have moved. So what we don't want to do is charge a bunch of people right away and notice, sorry, we didn't realize you were gone. We didn't have your address. So we will go after those folks. It might be a significantly smaller pool, so you probably won't see 5,000 cases in the first year, because we're going to try to, at least from the start, make sure that we're targeting people we know are here. Maybe they have a water bill with us that's current, or they have some other contacts with the city before we just start charging them with. It's a small charge, but it is criminal, so it'll be smaller than 5,000.
Well, ultimately, again, our goal is to not have 5,000 people, and we're trying to correspond and get that number down to a more manageable level. But the challenge becomes just not picking and choosing who you do and who you don't, because there's one thing, you want to make sure everybody pays their fair share, but there's a few things worse than that. That's if you got prosecuted, but your neighbor didn't, because we didn't get around to getting to them. Our intent is not to prosecute. Our prosecute as few people as possible. And that's where we're trying to look a little bit more proactively at what generates all those. It's one thing, the apartment complexes, but I think, we're trying to really get as much background information. Part of the challenge becomes and that's one of the things that it was kind of optional in the House bill changes is we have mandatory filing for people that live in the city that have taxable income. But what about kids that are 18 or college kids and all these sort of things that, they're here a little bit, maybe they work in college and trying to work your way through, but ultimately what we need to be able to determine, we may have to make some strategic decisions about it, is to maybe twerk that a little bit through our rules and regulations and say, we're just chasing our tail. There's so many of these and you can't get to the point of doing anything about it anyways. And so we may have to modify a little bit and maybe come up with some provisions that make it such that we truly are trying to go after, the taxpayers that should be filing and paying.
Yeah, we started with 5,000 there, and we're down to about 3,000 now with our first 2 morning letters.
Okay. Any questions for Dean or John? Okay, thank you very much. We'll take this to a third reading.
There's no public here.
Yeah.
Right, we have Tom.
Would anybody from the audience like to come forward? This is a public hearing. Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing. And we'll move on to item 11. This is 745 first reading. First reading of the ordinance 15-113.
Ordinance number 15-113, an ordinance making appropriations for the year 2016 and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and further to provide lawful appropriation available for expenditure by January 1st, 2016, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Mr. Hellman?
This is the annual start of the budget process, which began with me submitting my recommended budget to City Council on November 15th. This is the first of 2 required public hearings, and gives the public an opportunity to comment on the budget. It also gives us an opportunity to, if we don't have a lot of business on our agenda, to work on the budget. And I was going to suggest, I know we're trying to get dates set up here, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the second public hearing and next reading on the budget is the 14th. And then a final adoption is scheduled tentatively for the 21st. So depending on the calendar, what we have on the agenda for the 14th, we could also use that as a budget review session. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to council about. But first, I'm not going to reread the message. I think probably the most, the major highlight of that is the increasing challenge to deal with transportation and transportation issues as they relate to traffic, transportation issues as they relate to getting around town, the network that we have, the existing street network. And I know we have a report that's due back to City Council in mid-December to talk about really the next steps that we want to take to address that. So that will be the subject of further discussion at another meeting. But the other procedure, just kind of housekeeping thing I wanted to talk about was just getting the dates set tonight for the review and then how we want to approach the review. And I know Councilman Schaefer had sent out an email yesterday suggesting an approach which I think can make sense. We've done that in the past. And Councilman Hellinger sent out a note as well about it. I think it's going to take probably 3 to 4 sessions, the way I look at it, to do this in a way that we're able to make the review as comprehensive as it needs to be, to address the questions that council has, and to get to the point where council is comfortable with voting on the budget on the 21st. And obviously, between now and the 21st, if there are changes that need to be made to the budget, they can be made. You did receive last Thursday the line item detail and the other fund information. And I think you all got hard copies of that tonight. Dean passed those out. So those are all. So now you have the complete budget. You have the program outcome-based budget that I presented. You have the supplemental line item detail that directors have put together. Plus you have the other fund information. And there's a considerable amount of other fund information that we want to discuss. And in the past, we've not spent as much time on that as we should, I think. And I think one of those areas is some of the Glen Road, the funding of Glen Road, the new community authorities, the tax increment financing authorities that we've put in place. Spending a little more time on other funds gives us an opportunity to review what those are paying for, what the policy implications are, if there are policy questions that need to be addressed. So I'd like to be able to set aside some time as part of one of our sessions to go through those. And so that's just some general comments. Right now, we are scheduled, this goes back to my budget message for the December 1st, December 3rd.
Yeah, this is wrong here. You've got Wednesday, December 3rd.
Yeah, it should be Thursday, December 3rd, then Thursday, the 10th, and then we have a possible date on the 17th. There are other dates in there. Councilwoman Keller suggested earlier today when we were talking about the agenda, could we do something on a Saturday? We've done that in the past. Saturdays can work, but again, it's the same scheduling challenge that we have is if we're trying to find a date, four dates that all 7 can attend, it's challenging, but it's not impossible. We've done that in the past. So, but right now we're scheduled for next week 2 meetings, and then the following week, December 10th.
Why did we skip the 8th and December the 8th?
I don't know if there was another
There's no meeting.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. There are some other dates that could work for people, and if you take a look at your schedules.
I can't make the 10th.
Right, so it might mean the 8th. And I know that Councilman Jones is going to be out of town beginning this Friday, and we'll miss, if we have the sessions next week, we'll miss a couple of them.
I leave town Monday
Yeah.
and Thursday.
And so anyway, that's, we've got to confirm these sessions.
Would the rest of the council be open to doing a Saturday morning as opposed to coming in 4 or 5 times?
Well, and that kind of begets my follow-up question. That is, what's the expectation for whether we do these individual sessions, 2 nights, how many hours you're talking about, or if we do a super session on a Saturday, are we talking like almost like a retreat? We're going to mark off 6 hours and we're going to plod through this and get it done. What does that animal look like?
In the past, the last time we did a Saturday session, we did one in 2009. We went from 8:30 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Now that was one option. That's where we were doing reviews of every single budget. We changed that a little, I think, based upon some of the input, but and that was in addition to a work 6 to 10:30 at night, and then 3 other work sessions. So now we've modified that somewhat over the last couple of years. We've not spent as much time, which has been okay.
To me, it makes sense to, we do this every year, with the exception of Mr. Rohr. We do this every year. Why don't we focus on what's different? And then after that, focus on any questions or issues rather than taking, each separate area and getting a presentation on it, because we can all read it.
Well, that was kind of the approach, kind of the semi-approach we took last year.
Tell me more about what you're thinking.
My
there.
thought is not to give a big presentation, but we look at those things and you've got areas that are increased by 48% or whatever. Those are the things that, if there's something big that a particular department head has, bring it up. And I think we're talking 10 minutes here to go, look, here's the 3 or 4 things that we think you might want to know, like why is this category 50% higher than last year? So that, because we've probably all got those questions on this. Those are the kind of things that normally come up, like, why is this so much higher? If they answer those, we'll probably wipe out some of our questions. But my thought is by doing it by department, like last year and the year before, then we go to Chris and say, Chris, what do you have? And he'd be bouncing all over the budget with his question, go to you. It seems to me like if we focus on a couple different areas at once, and again, I'm not looking for them to get up there and give us a big long presentation. Just tell us the things that you think we'll probably want to ask about anyway, to try and streamline the process a little bit.
Like a 5-minute summary?
Yeah, something like that.
If even that, right? Because really, we can read it all, right? So it's like, what's your passion on this? What's really relevant that we can't read? Because
right,
why reiterate?
And again, if you know that there's something that is a significant increase or decrease or whatever, just point it out. So, we know we're up 48% for supplies, and that's because we're doing this year.
See, my questions come more from the portion of the budget that the manager submitted. Why was this not implemented? Why was this chosen not to be included in the budget? Maybe it had some merit to it. That's some questions I have, as opposed to, if it was a 50% increase, that's one thing, but I think, 5, 10%, I don't care about any of that stuff.
Right.
Well, I think going back to what Ken's saying, if we sit down through here, and even if our agenda is laid out just like our table of contents in the budget, going, okay, we're going to talk about public works streets. Now we're going to talk about public works, traffic, and just bam, 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 bam. Through, say, we're going to do these 5 sections in this session, these 5 sections in this session, whatever it takes, we get through them. And then we're focused. Everybody brings their notes. Okay, we're talking about public works traffic today. Everybody comes loaded for bear.
And Tom, as I mentioned before, my problem is that the first 2 Saturdays in December are not available. So now we're to the 19th before Christmas.
Yeah,
So.
that's doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's really up to.
Yeah, just doesn't work on me. I can't change it,
Skype?
so
Yeah.
I can't change it.
Sarah, Chris.
When can't you be here?
I leave Monday to come back Thursday night. So head to Minnesota.
Ooh, it's a long time.
Nice and cold.
I think, just going back to the taking each department by specific thing, the reason that we got away from that was because there was so much time spent presenting
Right.
and in the
Right.
minutia of it
Right.
that we,
And we're not going to do that. Right. And that's where the 3 to 5 minute overview, what are some of the policy issues? What are, what are the major changes, as you were saying, Lisa, what's different essentially? And then giving council members an opportunity to ask those questions that they might have. And
because in our budget sessions that we used to have back several budgets ago, we spent all this time seeing PowerPoint presentations and we never
got
had
away
any
from
time
that.
to,
We got away
you know,
from
to
that.
talk about it.
We got it.
Right.
I used to be here, we used to spend at least 8 days, 6 hours till midnight on budget.
Yeah. And that's
And
gone.
that's gone.
So is everybody else good on the 1st besides Chris?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yes.
And then the 4th?
Is it the
I'm sorry, the
third? I'm okay.
Maybe it's good with Chris, okay. And then do you want to do it on the 8th?
I'm not available on the 10th.
I
What
know.
about
Do you
the
want to do it on the 8th?
Yeah, that's the only one.
Anybody else?
Harbor.
What time are these meetings starting?
6:30. What time do you want them to start? You want 7?
So we're just doing the first,
The 1st and the 3rd. Now we're looking, do we want to do the 8th instead of the 10th or do,
I can't do the 10th.
all right, so there's 2 out for the 10th. How about the 8th?
I'm okay on the 8th.
8th is good for me.
But then you're missing 2 budget sessions.
I know.
So are we changing it to the 8th? Oh,
Well, I've got 2 out already on the 10th. So, we good for the 8th then, everybody?
I'm good. Yep.
All
What
right.
about the 9th?
Yeah, the 10th is no good.
3 hours.
The 9th is Board of Zoning. Do you have a meeting, BCA?
No, we won't know until next week.
Correct.
We have a major issue, but they have not responded.
7.
So,
They have,
they have,
but I don't think we'll have a meeting, but just won't know.
7. Monday, the 7th.
Guys, do Monday too.
Monday
We can
the
get
7th.
enough. We could skip the 1st and the 3rd so Chris can be back.
What are we
Or
going to
skip.
talk about all this time?
Oh, we don't need it.
I can do the,
Yeah, we don't need them. We cancel.
I can do the 7th.
I'm okay on the 7th.
I mean, if we
So
could,
if you have the
if we could get
7th
everything in the second week, yeah, I mean, I think it's better if we can have everybody
If we,
here.
yeah.
Yeah,
So is everybody good on the 7th?
Yep.
All right, everybody's good on the 8th.
And then you would have the
14th.
the 14th.
The 9th is a possibility. I don't want to do them 3 days in a row or not.
Well,
that's
It's brutal. The 10th
wait.
is out.
We're doing the 7th and 8th instead of the 1st and the 3rd?
right.
Shouldn't that be enough?
I think you're going to need one more. I think it'd be good to schedule one more session in addition to the 14th, which is your council meeting, your second reading.
16th.
Don't we already have one on the 17th?
16th.
Yeah, we have the 16th scheduled.
Yeah, I think we had put the 16th out there. We just hadn't solidified any of these
The
dates.
16th of what, December?
No.
It's preservation, that's historical preservation on the
Right.
16th.
Who's on that?
Me.
We're not losing Chris again. We just got him back, okay?
Hmm.
What's the agenda going to look like on the 14th?
Kind of depends on what comes from the planning commission on the, there's not, I mean, you have this tax issue.
Why won't the 17th work?
17th can work.
It will, but we're already here on the 14th for meeting. So I say we just stay a little bit longer. Everybody eat before you come that night. And let's,
Just hammer it out, because hopefully that's the last meeting. Hopefully we get most of it done the 7th and 8th, right? And we kind of put a bow on it.
So everybody's planning on being here on the 14th? Correct?
Dave, you,
That should just be set a public hearing.
well, then we could make the, if we could start early on that evening, if we could, on the 14th, but we could just make that a budget review session on the 14th. That'll give you,
On the 14th,
Look,
is the council
that's-
meeting.
Right, but if it's a light agenda, as you
Yeah.
just indicated, we can use that time to do budget review.
After the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a short meeting, tonight's meeting really didn't have to be that long. You could start your review at 7:30 or.
Yeah, I think it's.
And then if we had to, what's the backup date?
We
The
don't need a
17th.
backup date. I
Well,
mean,
If you had
what
to.
is there to talk about?
Yeah. 7th, 8th, and 14th.
Okay.
Just keep the 17th open just in case.
This is like 10 hours of meetings for a pretty much level funded budget with a couple changes.
December 16th.
I know. So what I would
16th is out.
What I would propose is I will set up a proposed kind of schedule that shows the departments for those evenings. And then what I would suggest we review
Yes.
and
So
get that
they're
out
not
to all
all
of
there
you.
for every
Right,
meeting.
exactly. We've done that before. Public safety.
Right.
And ED and DAS might be one night, and then public utilities, public works, and IT, and others, and then one of the other funds.
So what time do you want the start time to be on the
It's
7th and
really,
8th?
it's up to council.
I
know
think we're
Lisa's got-
I think we're moving backwards in terms of the way we did budget.
Well, we're not planning PowerPoint presentations. We're not any of that, Lisa. We're just, I think it's really just directors, departments. I can provide a policy, some of the policy issues. Then if there's questions, give the director maybe an opportunity to say a few things. And if there aren't any major questions, then
What if we have our questions ready the week prior?
actually, ideally, next week, we were supposed to meet,
Yeah.
hear questions in advance. That will make our time more productive.
Right.
Yeah.
Far more productive, because remember, we're getting it's kind of a bye week. Next week is, you just cancel
Yeah.
The
2
first and
meetings
third.
next week. So if you wanted, in advance of those meetings, get me questions next week, I can,
No.
if you can. If not, but
Yeah, because that way then it helps it further solidify that
Right.
agenda.
Okay, again, what time do you want to meet on the 7th and 8th? You want 6:30? Is that too early?
Six,
Anytime works for me.
6 doesn't,
6 is a little.
6 is,
6:30.
All right.
okay.
So we're looking at
With the expectation of what we think these may go like.
3
max of
hours.
3 hours.
Yeah, after 3 hours, that's.
Okay. So we have that
Starting to lose.
expectation set.
So the 7th, the 8th, the 14th, and possibly, only if necessary, Lisa, I understand. I saw that look. The 17th with adoption, the 21st. Now, you'll recall that last year, council made a number of changes. So we came back and there were actually changes made that were voted on, and then those got included as part of the final budget ordinance. So
And we're still.
we need to have enough time to do that. It looks like the 1st and 3rd are scratch.
December 28th going to be the final one, supplementals and everything, or?
I hope to have it on the
The
21st.
21st is what we were hoping to be the last year-end meeting, and that, George had suggested that we look at 2016 if we can, and when we set our dates, maybe try to set our budget dates
It's so easy to
a
do.
year in advance. Because we have not in the last few years had that last meeting in December, just because it's fallen right around Christmas, so.
Well, it's going to be hard to set budget meetings when we have council members that have to go out of town, so that's just going to be difficult.
Yeah. But we can at least decide what our council.
If you're going to move the council meeting, at least then we know.
Okay.
That should be easy.
Are you done?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, back to council comments then. Oh wait. This is public hearing. First public hearing.
Yeah, you gotta ask.
Anybody from the public like to speak on this? Tom, I'm talking to you.
I thought about it, maybe next time.
Okay. Okay, we'll close the public. And we will take comments, and I think I'm up to Mr. Beachnova.
What's she doing?
Yes, she's done. She got over us.
I have a couple. I received a letter from the Historical Society, and we're meeting with them, Tom and I think maybe Brad on Monday at 4 o'clock. They have some concerns, and we're going to discuss them, and I'll try to update you prior to the 14th. Parking and safety, I didn't see the Raw Miller Cheshire sign mentioned to you, Tom, and I mentioned to the chief that there was a small sign out there, and they wanted that sign enlarged on the corner where it says no left turns and traffic. There's a signage there.
We followed up on that with Jessica Omeroy.
Yeah.
We addressed one for Source Point, regarding their signage there.
No, on Cheshire and,
I recall that, and I know we forwarded it on, and Jessica had followed up. It was a confusion over an existing sign.
it's a real small sign, they want a larger sign.
I think we're talking about the same issue, but I'll check with her tomorrow. on that.
Okay, because she actually, the two associations out there called me and emailed me and said, thanks for taking care of the sign. The sign's still there, but I told them we were going to change it.
Well, there looks like there's a temporary Source Point sign now that's been kind of just put up there temporarily on the post. I don't know if that's the one.
That's not the one, but but if you would check into that one again. And then last Friday's Thanksgiving luncheon, I went to it, my wife went to it, and we had a wonderful time. Staff treated us like we were royalty. I got a drumstick, and it was very, very good.
Yeah, we got a lot of very nice feedback.
A lot of feedback on that staff. It's good to have that as an annual thing. And the only other thing I have is happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Enjoy it. And had a rough one last year. I hope to have a better one this year.
Council
I
comments?
have nothing to say about that.
Okay,
Jackie, when is the Christmas,
Mr.
the
Howard?
holiday party?
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Just, when we go into the parks, and I'll use Smith as an example. You pull into Smith Park, in either one of the parking lots, we have a plethora of signage there. We have the police your dog signage. We have, this is the hours of the parks in the summer and winter. And we have something else up there. And then, of course, we have our nicely carved park signage on the other side. And all three of those signs are all on separate posts, and they're all just, it kind of goes back to a wayfinding we were talking
Clutter.
about. Yeah, the clutter.
Clutter.
Can we
Consolidate them?
consolidate them, at least put them on one,
Well, one of the,
flipping post? Because it's like yeah, and they're all like 12 foot high. You have to be in the semi to read them. So, I mean, just
yes.
as an FYI.
Yeah.
You see the same thing at Mingo and.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can I piggyback on the sign just a minute?
Absolutely.
Concealed weapons. Can you have a concealed weapon in any of our parks?
If you have a
Permit?
CCW,
Can you?
yeah.
I had a call on that, and I said, yeah, I know we discussed it, but.
Yeah, didn't we discuss that a while back, that we had to change the ordinance because we can't really prohibit it?
We had to change it.
Right.
You could not restrict them from being there, so we don't have to have a
We
sign.
actually repealed an ordinance that said you couldn't have fire in parks, so that you could be.
Perhaps more notably than the concealed carry, because if it's concealed, we might not know about it. You can have open carry in the park, so someone technically can walk around with a machine gun if they're not doing anything.
They can't have it concealed.
They can have it concealed, but you wouldn't probably get any calls about it being concealed because it's concealed. You can open carry in the park
We're
too.
not gonna have any signage up there, no signage.
I think the state statute restricts it.
You cannot.
You cannot prohibit carrying.
Okay.
Okay, and then, well, yeah,
I'm sorry.
and more signage, more signs. Going back to, and I agree, the wayfinding signage looks wonderful downtown, especially the new parking, big parking, or big P's. But how soon will all that other, again, going back to digital clutter, all the old green parking signs and 26 paragraphs of when you're allowed to park here and when you're not, when's all that stuff go away?
It was supposed to go away in 16, but our revolving loan fund, which was the funding for that program, we're going to be using some of that money to loan to a local business that was approved by city council. So we're changing, I don't know how that's going to affect it, Dave. I don't know if that's affects us
That's for
drastically.
phase two, the wayfinding, the more of the citywide. I think George's question is related to the green and white, old parking signs, everything.
Those are the
Until,
civic
like,
signs.
No, no.
Downtown.
Well, the civic signs also, but yeah, specifically the big green part.
Some of them have actually come down as other signs have gone up for wayfinding, and you probably haven't noticed those unless you happen to be there and just watched it. The other more obvious ones are scheduled to come down. A thing we didn't want to do is take them down until these were up. And so that Public Works and Jessica, they scheduled those and a bunch of others to come down. You mentioned some of the parking signage to the parking lots, which they're complicated. I mean, because the times change and that sort of thing. And the goal would be that we would take the William Street lot, where those are right out on the street. You can't even really read them right there. And we'd move those into the lot at an appropriate place. We have some light poles that we could use to at least have the rules and regulations out there. And then maybe as we work in the future, work towards more simplicity in the rules to the extent that we can do that.
Okay. And then just to continue on the wayfinding, with the medallion that I gave to Bill today.
Can you show that, Bill? You have it? They're that big.
Yeah, they're huge, and you don't get that perspective when they're up there. Yeah.
That's what we refer to those as the street sign toppers for the Northwest neighborhood.
So then, with those, and obviously we don't want to see those coming down. Bill tells me those cost, what, over $100 a piece?
They're about $350.
$350 a piece. Now, just thinking back to my younger, probably more wild days, I could see where someone, college student maybe, might like to get a whole collection of those type of ones. Hey, we have 5 of those. I'm going to get the industrial park one and the Northwest neighborhood one, and I'm going to put them all in my dorm room. Seeing how they're falling down by themselves.
Should we find a better, I don't know, Bill, how are we securing those? Is that, I know that.
On top of existing signage, they're not on independent poles designed just for, trying to retrofit them into existing poles out there.
They use our standard signage clip. That was one of the things we wanted to do, use our standard clip for maintenance and such. They're, as you say, well, you don't notice them up there being as large as they are, but they do catch quite a lot of wind. And even when we have 2 or 3 street signs on top of each other, those catch quite a lot of wind too and fall down from time to time. Okay. What we're working on with Jessica and Public Works is probably using some adhesive. The clip is 2 parts, some adhesive between the clip, which I think will address the stealing issue, but also address sort of this wind loading issue as well. Worst case scenario, they could go on their own pole, on sort of their own stick, but I think nobody prefers that approach. If we can, we have to kind of live into this. Just
yeah, and we talked about, when we talked in wayfinding, we came up with maybe 5 different districts, something like that. We're doing like the industrial park, Northwest neighborhood, historic downtown.
Yeah, they were traditions badges, so not all of them necessarily would result in street sign toppers.
So,
for example.
Okay. So does like Northwest Neighborhood Association pay for those medallions? Or
They paid for 8 of them themselves. We put them up, kind of like we did with the banner program for them.
Okay.
They're unique. If it's a subdivision, that's sort of designed in. They have entry features, that sort of thing. Northwest Neighborhood's obviously been here for several hundred years, so that was a little bit different. And we bought 5 to kind of mark the boundaries of the neighborhood.
They bought the rest.
Gotcha.
And they bought the rest. And I think they have some interest in purchasing some more.
So how many total are in the Northwest right now?
13.
13. And they want more?
Well, being the gridiron street pattern, there's a lot of intersections to account for. So I think it was one of those things you weren't quite sure how they were going to be received. They seem to be received quite well, and as people in the neighborhood see them, I think there's a sense that, hey, I'd like to buy one through the NNA for my intersection, which is not altogether a bad thing, but we have to sort of work through the details.
Okay. And then just two more things.
Okay.
Again, going back to what Tom had mentioned, if we can come up with our 2016 calendar, because, if indeed we're never going to have that last weekend in December meeting, and we're always going to move it up, let's do it ahead of time. It chafes me that I have to miss this meeting, because I looked out there and I said, hey, we're meeting on the 28th, so I scheduled my stuff for the 21st. So, had we done that proactively at the beginning of this year, obviously I can make that meeting. So I think we need to do that, and we also need to set our spring retreat in fairly short order. Because I don't know how you guys' schedules fill up, but my entire through August is filled up by the first part of February with my third job. So, and whatever we can do there would be helpful. And then the last thing is with the passing of Mr. Norse, and of course they auctioned off all his train memorabilia in there. What is was it he that then kind of took over the lease on the old flower shop and started to make that look more like a depot again?
He had not entered into a formal lease agreement with the railroad before he passed away. He had made some improvements, and I don't know on what basis, but I've been in contact with the railroad about the property and just indicated that that's a landmark, and we'd prefer not to see every Sunday some type of use that we're not really comfortable with. There's really a higher, better use for that property than, a flea market on Sunday afternoons from 3 to 5. That's a really historic building, and they're going to follow up with us on what our options might be to work with the private sector to see it possibly get redeveloped. And but they'd never come to terms. The Robinsons still own the property where his where his museum was.
Okay.
It was just the station, but with our revamping of East William Street and that railroad bridge there's really some potential, I think, to make that more of a something that I think the private sector might be interested in.
Yeah, and I see where the Norse's freight depot is now on the market also. So
it is?
that's listed. Yeah, I think Cutler has a sign out there.
Is that
I just
Norse's
saw
or
that.
is that Robinson's? Okay.
Yeah, whoever, but
I think that's
I
Robinson's.
saw a sign
Okay.
on it the other day, so kind of sparked.
Cashman owns property
On the other side
on
of the
the,
street.
on the north side.
That's all I got.
Okay. Schaefer?
I have nothing.
You have nothing? Well, when I was at the parade yesterday, I went out the back door of one of the buildings over there, and I smelled grease really, really strongly. And I was looking at some of those big vents. And Chief, I think you need to take a look at the back of Opus. I'm worried there's going to be a fire. I don't know how often they clean that, or I don't know who regulates it, but you just need to take a look at it.
Yeah, there is supposed to be done every minimum. So
You can see where it's just dripped down, and it's a mess back there. So if you wouldn't mind looking at that, I'd appreciate it. And with that, I have nothing else. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And we are adjourned at 8:21.
7th, 8th, and the 14th. That's good. Read a little next week.
Yeah.